Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name's Joe Kuzma, and today we have a special guest from the LA Football Podcast on the LA Football Network and part of the Bleav podcast network, representing the Rams and a few other teams over there in the City of Angels. I'd like to introduce Ryan Dyrud. Ryan, how you doing today?
What's up, Joe? Doing good. I appreciate you having me on. Always an honor to come on these shows. So thanks for having me. Excited to talk some balls. We should have a great game here on Sunday. So excited to get into it.
Yeah. Sunday, Steelers coming off bye, week 6 bye. They're 3-2, facing the 3-3 Los Angeles Rams in LA, in the 4:00 Eastern time window, the later slates for folks who are going to be watching at home. So first of all, Ryan, just tell us a little bit about yourself. You kind of cover all things LA football.
Yeah. We so started the LA Football Network. I guess it's been about 3.5 years now. Covering Rams, obviously. We cover the Chargers, and then we cover the USC Trojans and UCLA Bruins. I was actually just out in South Bend last weekend for the USC Notre Dame game. Not a great game for USC, but a great experience out there at Notre Dame. So, but yeah, live here in LA. I've been here about 15 years, like most Angelenos, a transplant, and just love football and thought this city needed a little better coverage for the LA teams. So that's what we try to provide. So that's a very brief background of me, but hey, that's what we're all about.
No, very cool. Put out your credentials there. You can do it better than I can. I'm just a guy with a bunch of Steelers stuff here, but that will kind of cross over because I have a few questions that I'll ask as we kind of dig into some of the storylines for this upcoming game. Just your general impressions on the Los Angeles Rams so far this season. 3-3, is that about where you expected them? And I know some critics thought they would be kind of like a basement dweller maybe in the NFC West, or did you have higher maybe aspirations for this team for 2023?
So the overall consensus, we're actually, we have shirts being made here at the LA Football Network that say better than expected, because I think that's the theme of the year is better than expected when you look at this roster teardown of the offseason and just how competitive they've been able to be. And, even the games that they've lost, they've had opportunities to win every one of those games. And I know we'll get into, more schematically probably and matchups, but defensively, they've played way better than expected. When you look at outside of Aaron Donald and then probably Ernest Jones and Jordan Fuller, I mean, it was a very young, inexperienced group, and they've kept this team in every single game and played way above their means, I guess, in terms of talent regression. So, I think 3-3 is a good spot for them. I was much more optimistic than the consensus. I thought because of the landscape of the NFC, because of the quarterback of the NFC, I'm very high on Matthew Stafford. I know there was concerns about his injury, but everything we were told in the offseason and all the covers that we provided was he was 100% go. And if he's 100% go, to me, he's a top quarterback in the NFC when you look at the landscape there. So I always thought this team was a potential playoff team just because of what the NFC looks like, because of what the division looks like. And I think they're proving that. And, there's still a long way to go. They're still a 500 team, but they're well coached. They're competitive. They have a new fire they didn't have last year in that kind of dumpster fire of a season. So, but I think 3-3 based on who they've played is a good spot. And now they got to kind of stack some wins, moving forward.
Yeah, I will say as much. Like the Rams being at 3-3, I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for Matthew Stafford. I thought that was a great trade. The Steelers were still hanging on to Big Ben Roethlisberger in his final season when that trade was kind of made. And I was like, oh man, here's a guy that's still in his early 30s. He's been slinging the ball around with some really bad Detroit Lions teams. He's become available. I thought he might be available like 1 year later, where instead maybe the Steelers could have eked in instead of doing the Mitch Trubisky thing. Maybe went with Stafford, maybe not had to, I don't want to say extend themselves because Kenny Pickett fell right in their lap. So they didn't have to kind of expend the same kind of capital as maybe the Rams did in the past for Jared Goff or anyone like that. But as I say this, and we're talking about the Rams offense, of course, Stafford has some weapons to throw to. Cooper Kupp is back. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on how he looks alongside the rookie Puka Nacua, who was catching like about 1,000 balls in the first few games here, leading in receptions.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have Cooper Kupp back, I think he's shown that he's still one of the best receivers in football, just in the 2 games being back. I mean, the route running, is unparalleled, great hands, and just the leadership he provides to this offense. So, yeah, he's been great. I think he went like 7 for 150 and a touchdown last week against Arizona. So certainly an integral part of what they want to do. And Nacua obviously has been kind of the talk of not just the town, but the nation and the NFL, being a 5th round pick and what he's been able to do. And I think, honestly, we talked about this a lot on our show. It was, and it sounds so weird to say, but it was almost better for his progression and also this offense's progression that Cooper Kupp had to miss the first 4 weeks. And you never want a guy to get injured, especially a superstar of his caliber, but it forced the offensive play calling in Sean McVay, and it forced Matthew Stafford to create continuity, to create, a different reliability with other players on this roster, as opposed to just the Matthew Stafford Cooper Kupp show. And so I think it was great for this offense. We saw their first week back in that, tough game 2 weeks ago, that they were both very involved, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Now, last week that dropped a little bit. Puka still had 4 catches, but only 26 yards. So definitely not as involved. But I think a lot of the play design is Cooper Kupp's always going to be the first read. And if your first read's open, you're not going to go off it. So I think a lot of that's just by design. But it's been fun to see. Now, that being said, and I won't get too long-winded, but the passing game still isn't firing on all cylinders yet. And I think that's what's exciting, or should be exciting, for Rams fans, is there's still a lot of opportunity for this passing offense to get better, because we see flashes of it, but it's not consistent over 4 quarters. There'll be drives that stall out, or they even go 3 and out, just trying to force things. So if they can get all on the same page, sprinkle in Tutu Atwell in that mix as well, and get some Tyler Higbee action on the tight end, this is a passing offense that I think can be one of the most potent in the NFL. It hasn't got there yet, but it's certainly trending in the right way, and having Cooper Kupp back is certainly a big factor in that.
Yeah, well, let's not talk passing offense just yet, especially when we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers still trying to kind of find their own way. I think part of this, too, with the LA Rams is the Rams have had some pretty, what do you want to say, stout opponents to start like this season. The losses have been to the 49ers, the Bengals. Those are both teams that Pittsburgh fans are certainly familiar with. Haven't played the Bengals yet, but definitely familiar with in the AFC North. 49ers came into Pittsburgh week 1, punched the Steelers in the mouth, and then the other loss was to the Philadelphia Eagles. Didn't really have much of a struggle with the Arizona Cardinals, as some teams have. That's been a hot and cold division opponent for you guys. And then wins another division win. It's got to be nice, though. Doesn't it feel good? The Steelers are in that same spot. They have 2 division wins so far, and it's got to feel good, when you feel like the deck might be stacked against you. Like in the AFC North, a lot of people feel Ravens, Bengals, those are the teams that should be the front runners. Even some people put the Browns ahead. Gag. I don't like that myself, but you had to feel good that, the 49ers eventually dropped a game there. So that kind of helps you gain some ground, try and keep up some momentum. So is that 3 home games in a row now for the Rams? That's got to be nice, but they are facing a fresh opponent with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Rams, what is it? 12th in points scored, where the Steelers are 30th, and then their passing game ranked 6th overall, where the Steelers are 27th. The run game has kind of been in the middle of the pack for the Rams, and the Steelers still struggling there as well, as 28th. But the Rams are up in the middle of the pack, 17th, but maybe missing a couple of pieces here. I've been listening to the fantasy radio all week, and it's been pretty much, can you see insert name, as far as the number for the names that are concerned with who could be in the Rams backfield. How do you feel about this situation? Because I know, like, Kyren Williams, did he go to IR, or was it was the other running back?
Ronnie Rivers.
Yeah, both guys banged up. What does the running or the rushing attack look like for the LA Rams heading into Sunday?
Yeah, Ronnie Rivers goes, he's their backup. He goes on 4-week IR, and Kyren Williams did not go on IR, but he's in a walking boot. So certainly that's not great to see, but at least they're saying he's, week to week. So don't feel that they need to keep him out at least 4. It's tough, because I think that second half was one of their best rushing performances we've seen all year. On our show, we talk probably ad nauseum. Our fans probably get sick of it, but Sean McVay, for as great as he is, as I think he's a top 3 coach in this league, phenomenal in so many aspects, great leader, but his play calling, a lot of times he gets away from the run game, and he'll just go away from it altogether. We see them In that Bengals game, they ran the ball 14 times. In that Eagles loss, they ran the ball, I think, 13 times. This team, when they've run the ball 25 plus times, they're 3-0. And when they've ran it under 20 times, they're 0-3. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious, I think, what they need to do on offense. Now, it's going to be a little tougher, obviously, this week with who they have coming in. You know, Zach Evans is a rookie they drafted in the 6th round out of Ole Miss this year. He's a strong, powerful back. Got some reps late in the game last week, which hopefully that spills over. But obviously he's not a long tenured guy. Royce Freeman, who they had on the practice squad, they moved up. They signed Myles Gaskin off of Minnesota's practice squad, who we'll see if he gets reps, but obviously he's not going to know the offense at all. And then Darrell Henderson, who is a former Ram, hasn't played since he was cut by the Rams last November, so it's been about a year. But they did re-sign him, so there's some familiarity. But the one caveat there is, you know, they were very zone heavy back then. They're a lot more gap heavy in the run game this season. So will he fit in that schematically as much as maybe he would have last year? So if any fantasy listeners are out there, I would just stay away from the Rams running back room this week because I have no idea really who's going to get the main touches. I would lean more Zach Evans just because, you know, he's a rookie. He did get touches last week, and he's been in at least the rotation somewhat throughout all 6 weeks. But, you know, who's to know? So it's a group, though, they need to commit to. And against a good defensive front the Steelers have, obviously, you know more than me, but it's a good unit. They may not be efficient, but you still got to run the ball to keep the defense honest and allow you to open things up in that passing game. So, yeah, it's upsetting because it finally got going last week in that second half. But we'll see. You know, this is where, you know, you earn your salt. This is where we'll see what Coach McVay and Mike LaFleur, the offensive coordinator, are able to cook up with this kind of new batch of running backs.
Yeah, and it's been one of the hot stories going around, you know, Pittsburgh in the last week or so, is that the Steelers had traded guard Kevin Dotson over to the LA Rams right at the end of training camp. They just had an influx or just a logjam of offensive linemen. Somebody was going to get cut, so they trade someone. Now all of a sudden we see like we love and hate Pro Football Focus rankings because we know sometimes they're just baloney. But how do you feel about that though? With Kevin Dotson having played, he didn't play the first 3 weeks. And now he's been the starter. Yep. Just some comments on that, because there's a lot of people like that are kind of out of their mind over here in Pittsburgh because they replaced Kevin Dotson with Isaac Seumalo, who was a free agent from the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Steelers are still having their struggles with their offensive line, of course. Whereas now you're seeing, oh, the guy they traded away is doing a phenomenal job for the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, sticking with the theme here, the offensive line has been much better than expected as well this year, and Dotson's a big part of that. You know, when it started off with the trade, obviously you want to get acclimated as well, and I love the trade when it happened just because they did need a little bit more depth, and you know, they had Joe Noteboom playing at that right guard position, and then he gets injured, and so they slide in Kevin Dotson, and he's been great. He's been one of their top performers on that offensive line, and they've had, you know, Coleman Shelton plays next to him at center. He got a little banged up 2 weeks ago, so they had to have Brian Allen in, but you know, he's played well within the confines, and I think having Rob Havenstein, who's, you know, the longest tenured Ram left on this team, I think that certainly helps in terms of continuity. But yeah, he's been great, and it's been a unit that has played, I'll say it again, much better than was expected going into this year. That was like the big question mark, especially heading into week 1. We still didn't know who was going to be starting left tackle. Was it going to be Joe Noteboom? Was it going to be Alaric Jackson? And then basically right before kickoff, they announced Noteboom's going to play guard. Alaric Jackson's going to be your starting left tackle for the 2023 season. And it's worked out in a sense of that way. And then obviously having Dotson help. So yeah, thank you, Steelers. It's been a good one for us. And you know, another one, which I'm sure we'll get to, but Kella Witherspoon has been lights out on the secondary for this Rams team.
Yeah, I think a lot of that. Yeah, and everyone's going to say, "Oh, that's coaching." Well, it's to some degree, but it's also scheme, and so you can't always say it's just coaching. It's coaching. Scheme is coaching, but there's different styles and different systems. That's why you see players leave different teams and then have success elsewhere, or otherwise have success in one spot and fail, even when they're a big prized free agent signing. So I was just curious your thoughts on that too, because they obviously upgraded when it came to Dotson. I never had anything, especially against Dotson, but like 2 years ago, it came out that he showed up at camp out of shape. He had an injury. He didn't really start. He was on the PUP list, I believe, to start camp. So there's like a lot of harsh feelings with that as to whether or not we're talking about a guy that was like a 3rd or 4th round pick. He didn't go to the NFL Combine, so he's been kind of a Cinderella story even to this point to be an NFL caliber starter. So I will get to Ahkello Witherspoon here in a minute, but you did mention the Steelers, their defensive front, so it'll be interesting to see how that all comes into play. I was taking a look at the Steelers injury reports here, and really nothing really of to note. Everybody on the Steelers side has kind of nursing back to health because it was a bye week. So just pulling it out, and we got to mention the punter. Steelers parted ways with Brad Wing after elevating him twice in the absence of Presley Harvin. The bye week has allowed Presley Harvin to have about 3 weeks of rest. Steelers should get Deontay Johnson back off of injured reserve. There was a day of rest for Patrick Peterson. Anthony McFarland, another injured reserve candidate, and also primary special teams player as a kick returner. You got a couple reserve players when it comes to Nick Herbig. He was limited with quad. He's kind of like the 4th string edge rusher and offensive lineman. Kind of interesting situation for the Steelers when we get to them on offense is seeing how their offensive line is going to be stacked up, because we see Dan Moore Jr.'s back at practice, and there's some question as to whether or not he starts over the 14th overall pick this year, 1st rounder rookie Broderick Jones out of Georgia, and then James Daniels, who's been out for a few games as well, looks to be back to full health, as is tight end Pat Freiermuth. So the Steelers have been licking their wounds a little bit. Rams, likewise. You had a couple DNPs that are on here for Wednesday. We don't have any of the participation yet. They haven't participated in practice yet for Thursday. Likewise, the Steelers are just getting underway. So Ernest Jones, linebacker, Laurel Murchison, defensive tackle Kyron Williams, who we had already mentioned, those and along with just a day of rest for Darian Kendrick. Those were your did not participate for Wednesday. Limited Ben Skoranek, wide receiver, Kobe Turner, defensive tackle, and Joe Noteboom, who you'd mentioned earlier as well, one of the offensive linemen. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of major impact guys except for Kyron Williams, who had a very good game last Sunday. Any of these kind of stick out for you? Because it seems like it's more the Steelers side of things here, where they're getting some players participating in back that are going to make more of an impact maybe than the Rams might be losing.
Yeah, obviously we mentioned it. The Kyron Williams one is a big one, and he'll be out for sure for this one. And then the Noteboom and Jones, it seems like that's every week. Noteboom for sure is limited or does not practice. Then he ends up being good to go for game time, as he's kind of a rotational offensive lineman now. And Ernest Jones was very limited last week and was able to go, so I expect him to be okay as well. The actual big one on there is Darian Kendrick, who's their starting corner, and not sure how much the news has made it out that way, but he was actually arrested after the Arizona Cardinal games with 2 misdemeanor gun charges. And so the Rams are waiting basically for legal act, what's going to happen with him. So, it could be where he's a go this weekend. It could be where he misses this game and is back the next. Like, we really don't know, obviously letting the legal process and respect to him and what's going on with that. So, but that is a fairly big one. He's a kind of a boomer bust DB, but he's been their starter dating back to last year. He's had very, very good games as well. So if he does not go, and if he's held out of this one, you're going to look at potentially Trey Tomlinson, who was their 6th round rookie out of TCU, who's a really good corner, but at 5'9", like, is he going to match up against a George Pickens, who's much bigger? Is he going to go up against Deontay Johnson or what? And one thing with him through camp was he's a very physical corner. And in college, you can get away with that. In the pros, you're going to get flagged every time. So that's something to watch for, is if the rookie gets the start and what they do in that position if Kendrick's not a go. So, they just added Duke Shelley as well from the practice squad. So that actually is a fairly significant position to kind of look out for, of what they do there, basically to line up on the other side of Ahkello Witherspoon come Sunday.
Yeah, very important to go through the injury reports. I'm thinking the same thing when I look at I got Puka's numbers. He's 50 receptions, the most by a rookie in 6 games ever, in their first 6 games ever, and 598 receiving yards, also most by a rookie in the Super Bowl era. 5+ catches of at least 5+ receiving yards in 5 of his first 6 career games, and you put him right alongside Cooper Kupp, who had 7 receptions for $148 and a touchdown last week. So that seems like a handful for the Steelers to maybe keep up with. We're going to see We Bleav here one of the main things that happened when they last played against the Baltimore Ravens at home was playing Joey Porter Jr., their second round pick, but the 32nd pick overall in this year's draft. He pretty much was in for the entire time in the secondary for the second half. And they kind of had Patrick Peterson floating around as more of one of their big corners, marking up on Mark Andrews, and left Levi Wallace on the other side. But tall task with Nacua and Cooper Kupp for either a Porter or Wallace. Porter kind of in the same category, very physical guy. He hasn't been flagged much yet, which was kind of the knocks. They were going to say, hey, this guy at the pro level is going to have to watch being too handsy. So we'll see how that plays out in this game. I think, though, we're going to have to flip over now to when the Rams, or when the Steelers have the football. And you kind of hinted to it. That's a familiar name. Former Pittsburgh Steeler, Akilla Witherspoon, playing pretty solid. I can't really peg what the deal was. I think it was more or less the Steelers knew by signing Peterson, and also they knew they were going to draft, or they were drafting Joey Porter Jr., that there really wasn't a spot for Witherspoon. Same thing kind of happened in the nickel corner position with the Steelers with Arthur Millette. They kind of they kind of parted ways with everybody. Cam Sutton was a free agent and went over to the Detroit Lions. So they're still trying to find their way. They're going to have their hands full when you get somebody that's a legit wide receiver one, like Devontae Adams just ran around and did whatever he wanted to. I could see Cooper Kupp kind of having the same way with them as well. Whether or not George Pickens and Deontay Johnson's return has as big of an impact, I look at the Rams secondary, and there's just not a lot of headliner names that kind of stand out when you're talking league wide. It's going to have to come from pretty much old guard names like we know, like Aaron Donald. And we're going to see if the Steelers, do they play Broderick Jones? Do they have James Daniels back to full health? And we've had our center, Mason Cole, kind of playing below the line as well. Freiermuth hasn't been out there, but the tight ends haven't been targeted much as well. I think our third round pick, Darnell Washington, also of Georgia, kind of could be a sixth offensive lineman in a lot of cases, a very large guy who has been termed, if you're not familiar with this, Mount Washington is what you kind of see over with the bridges and stuff when you look at the scoreboard and you see the stadium shot at what's now Acrisure Stadium, formerly Heinz Field. We hate the name Acrisure Stadium here, but
yeah, it's rough.
But he hasn't been involved much in the passing game. Freiermuth, not so much either. I did have his statistics up, and I pull it up, but I want to say, I don't want to guess.
Yeah, I have him in fantasy, so I know it's not much.
Yeah, you're waiting for a breakout. I mean, he's been targeted only 13 times, 8 receptions, 53 yards so far this season. So it's been kind of a letdown with Pat Freiermuth. So where that source has to come from, I don't know. We really want the 1-2 punch, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren in the run game. Kenny Pickett was not very sharp to start this season. Looks like he gets better, especially as the games go on. So how do you view the Rams defense up against what has been a very bottom-feeding, cellar-dwelling Steelers offense?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, "Oh, Canada!" Right? That's what everyone loves talking about out there, I'm sure. But
well, yeah, as you say that, though, you complained about Sean McVay too. So everybody just thinks everything's peachy keen across all teams. I think every fan base and every analyst and critic has something to say about their own team.
100%. I say that actually all the time. Like it's very, in my opinion, I think it's healthy for me that I cover 4 teams because I see so many different avenues, and I'm also a fan of others. We don't need to get into this, but I'm from Denver, Colorado originally, so we need to talk about the dumpster fire over there. But like that's where. So I basically have 5 teams to kind of pick from and see, and so it's so true. Like every team has no team is perfect, no play calling's perfect, no great head coach is perfect. You know, we have a lot of, I know a ton of Niner fans, and they're always complaining about Kyle Shanahan. So the grass isn't always greener, but it probably is a little greener than what's going on over in the Steel City, I'm sure. But yeah, you know, this defense, I think I don't want to just keep repeating this, but it's better than expected. And it's a young group. I think what they did well, Joe, in this roster construction or teardown, if you will, this offseason, is they made sure they still had one elite player at every level. So you have obviously Aaron Donald, the great former Pitt product at the defensive line, Ernest Jones at the linebacker position they drafted 2 years ago, who's really come into his own as one of the top backers in the not just the conference, but I think the league, and that's why they felt comfortable with letting Bobby Wagner walk after this big contract. And then on the back end, Jordan Fuller, who they drafted out of Ohio State 2 years ago as a 6th-round safety, and he was injured all last year, so everyone kind of forgot about him, but he's come back and is playing at that elite level that he did as a rookie when he seized that job as a 6th-round pick. So they were able to get those key pieces at each level, and then they add in some free agents, as we already alluded to, Kelly Witherspoon, and then it's just a lot of youth. You got Byron Young as a rookie edge rusher. You got Kobe Turner as a rookie interior guy next to Aaron Donald. You have Kobe Durant as a rookie slot guy at corner. You have all these really young players. Not to mention they brought back John Johnson on the back as well as some vet presence there. So, it's a unit I think that's played really well. Their one, I think, probably shortcoming is edge pressure. I mentioned Byron Young, who's played well as a rookie, but is just a rookie. He was a 3rd-round pick, so he's not a Von Miller type going 2nd overall or anything. So still needs something out of him. And on the other side, they have a guy named Michael Hoyt who didn't even used to play edge. They moved him there out of necessity due to injury last season toward the end of the year. And then he's trained at that all offseason and is their now starting edge guy who plays admirably, but just doesn't quite have the talent level to truly set the edge and bring that presence there. So that is definitely their Achilles heel. So if the Steelers and Najee Harris and the running game are able to attack those edges, that's where I think this Steelers team is going to be able to, get their bread this Sunday. If the Rams, though, can hold their own and kind of use stunts, Coach Henderson is their defensive line coach, I think one of the best in the business. I'm shocked he's not a D coordinator yet, but I'm sure he will be soon. But they run a lot of stunts with Aaron Donald, knowing he's going to get double and triple teams. But then it forces running backs and quarterbacks to funnel to the outside where then they have Ernest Jones or whatever waiting for them as that QB spy. So it'd be really interesting to see how they draw things up to kind of force their hand. But if I'm the Steelers, I'm definitely attacking those edges, specifically on the left side while Hoyt lines up will probably be their best bet.
That sounds like you got maybe put more thought into this than Matt Canada would put any past it. I know a lot of people really roast him. It's tough, and I don't defend the guy whatsoever. Things just aren't clicking. There's been so much newness, turmoil. You deal with injuries, etc., and every team's got to deal with that. It just he does seem sometimes that he's a fish out of water. Kobe Durant obviously was a player that definitely came to mind. He was spoken of a lot here during the draft process the year before, and the Steelers obviously they added Joey Porter. Also had Corey Trice, who ended up on IR. He was a 7th-round pick from Purdue. So the Steelers added Darius Rush, who was also a teammate of Durant's back at South Carolina, which is interesting now because I wanted to ask you, covering the other LA teams, the Steelers parted ways with Desmond King, who they picked up off of kind of I don't know this. I don't want to call it the trash heap and disrespect any players, but he was released by the Chargers as well during the offseason. So I just kind of wanted your input on that because it seems like now, hey, there's 2 different teams here that have just been well, Desmond King just isn't quite a fit. And it just kind of goes to the larger picture of does the Steelers organization know what they're doing here? You know what I mean? And I just wanted your input on that because to me, it felt like a player of his caliber. He's 28 years old. He's been around the league for quite some time, kind of bouncing around different teams now, from the Texans, the Titans, and then with the Chargers before that. Do you have any kind of opinion? Is he kind of just done as far as being a pro athlete, an NFL caliber corner, or maybe he just wasn't the right fit in Pittsburgh in the teams before?
Yeah, it kind of feels that way. I mean, you never know. We see a Kelly Witherspoon that was on 3 teams before now, finding a true home. I think the same age, 28, right? And finding a home now with the Rams and is playing really well. So you never know if that can happen. And that's probably why the Steelers went after him. A guy that had a good early career, drafted by the Chargers, I believe out of Iowa, I want to say, and had some really good years. And then just kind of what his problem was, without diving too deep into, schematically and but he was a real kind of boomer bust corner, and he played mostly in the slot back when he was with the Chargers, and, would have some great games, kind of got one of those nicknames that everyone likes to call every slot person, the slot god, and played really well. That he'd have games where he just got torched and burned and stuff like that. And he also was heavily involved in special teams, and then, wasn't quite earning his keep in that regard as well. So, there's still talent there. Obviously, when you have some good years in the NFL, I don't think it just full on dissipates. But, it's now he's had his shots at a few different organizations and it hasn't worked out. He wasn't able to strike that iron that he had early on. And so it's not going to be easy. I don't think he's necessarily a top candidate to go after, as you just alluded to, but you never know. You maybe get an Ahkello Witherspoon type resurgence, but it's going to be tough for him to kind of get back to that point after having so many failed attempts since that early kind of good breakout to his young career.
Yeah, and it was a little awkward too. I know the Steelers, by necessity, were having him return kicks in. I'm trying to think if he was doing punt return too, but typically Mike Tomlin does not place his defensive backs in that type of role. He was inactive after joining the team. And now that they have Anthony McFarland potentially coming back from injured reserve, it's kind of like, well, where else are we going to place this guy on the field? And they saw an opportunity to pluck Rush, who's now on his third NFL roster as a rookie, which is kind of odd. Drafted by the Colts, was on the practice squad of the Chiefs. I don't know that I get too excited over something like that, but hey, you never know. Maybe a better fit, maybe misused in some other cases. And obviously the Chiefs saw something if they at least had him on the practice squad there. But just a little bit of, I don't know. Do you have any other kind of notes as far as any offensive or defensive matchups? Maybe I'm trying to think of anything else that we might not have covered. Otherwise, just a little bit of bookkeeping I'll go over here as far as game time and where to watch and where to listen.
Yeah, no, I think we hit most of it. I've said, and I'll say it again, like if this Rams team runs the football and commits to it 25 plus times, regardless of who the running back is, I think they have a good shot. If the Steelers, really attack that left side of the defensive line, I think that offense can move the ball somewhat against this defense. And we'll see obviously what the Darian Kendrick situation looks like out here in LA, if he's a go or not. But I think as long as for one thing we didn't really talk about, I think is the Steelers pass rush. I know we talked about the defensive line, but not necessarily the pass rush, with obviously the great TJ Watt and who else you guys have on the defensive line. And so when you look at play design and what Sean McVay should do, and he's a lot smarter than me, but what I would do is obviously commit to the run to take the pressure off and force the trenches to play physical, but also get the ball out of Stafford's hand quickly. A lot of play design in this offense can be long developing plays, and they can work a lot of times, but it also makes Matthew Stafford very susceptible to taking big hits. Even if he's not sacked, he gets hit a lot in that pocket because of just the length of these play designs that take, and getting Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua 17, 18, 19 yards down the field. So when you have a caliber player like TJ Watt, we'd love to see a lot more of these jet sweep motions, a lot more of these, short dig routes, little out routes, little comebackers that they can at least move the football quickly and keep Matthew Stafford, clean in the pocket and not taking a big hit. So that just would be the last thing I'd look for. If the Rams offense is able to do that, that would bode well for them.
Yeah, good pickup. I don't always like when I have a guest to just brag about, Steelers, but TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are the only duo that are in the top 10 heading into last week anyways, and maybe still holds true even during the bye, with the most amount of quarterback hits and pressures. And of course, in the last game, they each had a sack. Watt had 2 against the Ravens, 2 pass deflections. He's always knocking the ball down at the line of scrimmage. He could be a guy that even just ends up with the ball. Hard to believe, but TJ Watt could pick people off as well. And then, of course, he forced a fumble, or he had a fumble recovery that was forced by Alex Highsmith. So Alex Highsmith actually pops on a lot of radars as an underrated player. He kind of flies under the radar of a lot of folks, and mainly because you have such a big star on this Steelers defense, such as a TJ Watt. He really does overshadow Alex Highsmith. Would look probably like a lot bigger name if he were on a different roster and it were only him doing some of the work. But at the same time, does he get the same kind of accolades if TJ Watt isn't on the other side? So it kind of plays hand in hand. It's a double-edged sword there. Just a little bit of housekeeping too, in case yourself, Ryan, that you're watching this maybe at home. I thought about going to SoFi Stadium myself, but 4:05 Eastern kickoff. Craig Rolstad is the referee. I have nothing against Craig Rolstad. At least it's not John Hussey and a few of these other crews that I've seen out there that have been like really, really bad through it. I try not to say too much about officiating, but sometimes you just can't help it. It's just been, it's been poor in some cases. So this game's on Fox. It is in the late window for the folks watching at home. If you are in obviously Pittsburgh area, throughout much of the Northeast and even into parts of the Midwest, Ohio, West Virginia, and Virginia. You're going to catch this game. It's in the blue here on the map, courtesy of 506sports.com. And then, of course, over there in Southern California, aside from, oddly enough, well, maybe not San Diego, oddly enough. I think maybe they're playing in the same window. I don't have it. I do have it up. Who is the green? Oh, they're going to get they get the Raiders. So Raiders and Bears. Oof. Yeah. That's
for them. That's a rough one to have to watch.
Yeah.
I love how the little bit of Memphis gets the Steelers Rams game.
Yeah,
just randomly over there.
It's always the Steelers have some odd pockets. You could even see it down into southern Florida down there too, in the Miami area. But for the most part, if you're used to seeing the Steelers, if you're in the AFC North coverage area with Browns and Bengals, even the Colts, you're going to end up getting this game. Otherwise, you end up with the Lions and Ravens in the early window. It seems like CBS has the doubleheader this week. So, and I shall mention for some of the folks that may be listening over on SiriusXM Radio, Steelers call is on 135 or 386. Rams call on 83 or 226. So that'll about wrap it up for us. Thank you, Ryan. Tell us where we could find you, over at the Bleav podcasts and the LA football podcast and all the other places that you seem to be spread around. You seem like you wear very many hats, even though I'm the only one wearing one right now.
Yeah, a lot of virtual and invisible hats, I guess. But no, Joe, thanks so much for having me on. It was a pleasure. But yeah, LAFBnetwork.com is our website where all of our content lives. We have, we're on YouTube, LAFB Network, or all of our team channels, Rams, LAFB, Chargers, LAFB, so on and so forth. All of our social handlers are LAFB Network, so really easy to find. And myself is Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. So if for whatever reason anyone has any inkling for LA football, that's where to find us. I know a lot of Steelers fans live in the Los Angeles area, so I'm sure we run into each other. Anyway, we are going to do our tailgate takeover show for this one. So we'll be at SoFi bright and early, perusing the tailgates, playing some games, interviewing fans, both Rams and Steeler fans, and, probably handing out some free drinks. So maybe we'll see you at SoFi.
Yeah, pretty cool. I wish I was heading out there, man. It was just logistically same thing happened for me where I would have to fly out of, no direct flights, and some of your smaller carriers just aren't going into LAX. So you have to go Orange County, or you have to go an hour away. And I'm like, why would I do that? So one of these days I'm going to get out there though. Yeah, definitely check them out. There's definitely a lot of folks, a lot of the various Steelers fan groups that are having tailgates that are out there, and also check those out too, folks, if you happen to be listening and you're looking for that, or just tune in. It'll be a lot more fun watching you, Ryan, on Sunday than it will be maybe some of these pre-game shows. I get bored, you have somebody that's just standing there with the microphone at 5 hours before kickoff in an empty stadium. There's just not a whole lot, especially for a game that's in the later window for the Eastern time zone. So we'll see. As far as keys for the Steelers, you said a lot for the Rams, but all I really got is that they're usually slow starters after the bye, and they don't necessarily have the best of success. Mike Tomlin teams seem to not wake up playing those West Coast times, those West Coast trips, and it's already, what is this? They have 3 or 4 of them on deck so far this season, so they'd already gone out to Vegas for one game. I'm trying to actually think, and of course I closed the schedule. I was like, I thought they already had maybe 2 of these. They always, I can't say that they have the greatest success. Yeah, they hosted the Niners. I guess the Texans aren't a West Coast trip. It's a flight. So, but the Steelers, this is a team that last year, I don't think they left the Eastern time zone. So this is a lot of change for them. So we'll see if they wake up and hopefully they don't get punched in the mouth right away and have a slow start on offense. They're going to need to be a little bit faster and show that they are committed to making changes. Mike Tomlin said they are committed to making changes. Hopefully they have all of the rookies that end up playing in this game have an impact. Start Joey Porter Jr., start Broderick Jones. And we got another dude on the defensive line from Wisconsin named Keanu Benton, who was the 48th or 49th pick overall, that's made an impact. I've been banging my fist for all of that. If you'd like to hear a little bit more about what we'd like the Steelers to do to keep that momentum through the bye week, check out myself and one of my other usual cohorts, Brian E. Roach, from our show earlier this week. Otherwise, be sure to tune in and check out Ryan over on the LA Football Podcast on Sunday. It sounds like they'll have some really cool stuff, and you'll be able to needle some people. But there's not a real big rivalry or anything that like kind of has these teams stick together. There's no real history, especially other than back when they were the St. Louis Rams, the field caught on fire. So that's about the only thing you can really bring up. They don't usually run in their own in circles between each other. Mike Tomlin is 4-0 against the LA Rams. I guess that's the only thing, and that's only by virtue of he's been coaching for a long time, so he's won the past 4. Otherwise, I was trying to see Sean McVay. Well, it said Sean McVay. Oh, somebody from NFL has got this wrong then. Mike Tomlin can't be 4-0. Have they faced each other? Yeah, they faced each other. Mike Tomlin versus Sean McVay? Had to have, because it says McVay is 1-0, so versus opponent. Somebody's got this wrong on the media printout. There has to be something wrong there. So I'm going to leave it at
something's
that.
Off.
Yeah, something's definitely off. You can't be 1-0 and then the other guy's 4-0 against the same team. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Ryan, thanks for joining us. And folks, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a rating review wherever you're watching or listening from. We appreciate you. Once again, my name's Joe Kuzma, Ryan Dyrud over from the LA Football Podcast and the Bleav Podcast Network. Until next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.